Chapter 1. The House I Held Together for Everyone Else. What if the people who share your blood are the same ones trying to erase you in court, your own family demanding everything while calling it love? Tonight, I am your host, and this is not just a story about inheritance or betrayal. This is a story about family turning into opponents, about silence being mistaken for weakness, and about the single moment when one quiet decision shattered an entire web of lies. Stay with me, because what happened when she finally spoke did not just change the verdict, it changed who truly lost everything. I am telling this from a place that took me years to reach. Not peace exactly, but clarity. I am 48 years old now. I live alone in a quiet condo outside Madison, Wisconsin, and I work in compliance for a regional financial firm. My life is orderly, predictable, and fully mine. That did not happen by accident. It happened because of a house I once believed was my responsibility to hold together for everyone else. Back in 2010, my life looked very different. I was living in Chicago then, working long hours and building a career that rewarded attention to detail. Around that time, my father Thomas Hale started getting sick. At first, it was subtle. Missed doctor appointments, utility bills paid late. My mother Ruth insisted everything was under control, but it was obvious things were slipping. The house was in Shorewood, a quiet suburb north of Milwaukee. It was the home my parents bought when I was a teenager, a 2-story place with a narrow porch, a maple tree out front, and a kitchen that always smelled faintly of coffee and lemon cleaner. It was not a grand house, but it was solid, or at least it had been. When my father's health declined, I began stepping in without being asked. I paid the property taxes the first year they were late, then the second. I arranged for the roof to be repaired after a winter storm. I set up automatic payments for the utilities so no one would have to worry about shutoff notices. I did not announce any of this, I just did it. It never felt like sacrifice, it felt like responsibility. I was the oldest child, I was single, I had the most stable income. Everyone seemed relieved that I could handle it. No one questioned whether I should. My younger brother Daniel lived nearby. He was energetic, charming, always talking about his next big plan. My mother adored that about him. She said he had ambition, that spark my father used to have before illness wore him down. Daniel's wife Megan was observant and soft-spoken. She smiled easily and asked questions that made people feel heard. At family dinners, she often sat back slightly, watching how conversations unfolded. My mother repeated one phrase more than any other during those years: "We keep the family together." She said it when money was tight. She said it when my father was hospitalized. She said it whenever a decision felt uncomfortable. I believed her. Or maybe I believed in what I thought those words meant. My father passed away in 2016. The grief was heavy, but so was the confusion. He had never formalized a clear estate plan. The house remained under my mother's control, and nothing was discussed openly about long-term ownership. I did not push. It felt inappropriate. My mother was still alive. Daniel was trying to establish himself. I told myself there would be time later. In 2018, Daniel announced he was starting a real estate company. He called it Riverbend Property Solutions and spoke about it with the confidence of someone who already pictured success. At a Sunday dinner over roasted chicken and green beans, he explained that the early years would be about securing financing and building credibility. Then he looked directly at me. He said there were some technical documents, just temporary, mostly related to credit strength and tax efficiency. He said my background made me the obvious choice. Megan nodded along and added that it would help keep everything clean and professional. My mother stayed quiet, but she did not object. I hesitated, not because I suspected anything malicious, but because something in me wanted to slow down. Daniel laughed and said I was overthinking it, like I always did. He said it was just paperwork. I signed. Life moved forward. My work became more demanding. My mother called less often. I assumed that meant things were finally stable. I was wrong. In the spring of 2022, I received an email from a regional bank in Wisconsin. It was addressed to me by full name. It referenced a loan balance of over $400,000. It mentioned collateral, specifically my parents' house. I reread the message 3 times before my hands started to shake. I called the number listed and confirmed it was legitimate. The loan was active. My name was on it. I called Daniel immediately. He sounded surprised, almost irritated. He said it was a clerical issue. He said banks made mistakes all the time. He told me not to worry and said he would handle it. Something in his tone unsettled me. That weekend, I drove to Shorewood. I wanted to speak to my mother face to face. When I arrived, the house looked the same from the outside. Same maple tree, same porch light. But when I tried my key, it did not work. My mother opened the door after a moment. She did not seem flustered. She said she had the locks changed for safety. She said it casually, as if it were a minor update. I stepped inside and felt like I had entered a place that remembered me but no longer expected me. The furniture had been rearranged. Some of my father's things were gone. When I asked about the loan, my mother told me not to worry. She said Daniel was taking care of everything. She said I should trust him. I stood in the kitchen where I had once sat up late paying bills so no one else would have to think about them. I realized then that something had shifted. I did not yet know how deliberate it was or how far it went, but for the first time in my life, I felt like I was standing on the wrong side of a decision that had already been made. I left without arguing. I drove back to my hotel in silence. That night, I did not cry. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment I chose ease over clarity. The house I had held together was still standing, but I was no longer sure it had ever been meant to shelter me. Chapter 2. When Family Decides Who Can Be Sacrificed. I did not confront anyone immediately after that visit. I went back to Chicago and returned to my routines. But everything felt slightly off, like a familiar room after the furniture has been moved. I went to work, answered emails, reviewed compliance reports, and spoke in meetings with the same steady voice I had always used. On the surface, nothing had changed. Underneath, I felt a constant hum of unease. The first thing I did was look for facts, not accusations, not assumptions. Facts. Late one evening, after dinner, I opened my laptop and logged into the county property records. I searched the Shorewood address slowly, deliberately, as if speed might make the result worse. When the page loaded, my chest tightened. My name was gone. There it was, in black and white. Ownership had been amended in late 2022. The house was now listed solely under my mother, with an associated lien tied to a commercial entity, Riverbend Property Solutions, Daniel's company. I stared at the screen longer than I needed to. Part of me expected the system to refresh and correct itself. It did not. The next morning, I called my mother and asked if we could talk in person. She suggested Sunday dinner the same way she always had, like nothing was wrong. When I arrived, Daniel and Megan were already there. The table was set neatly, plates warm. Everything looked normal, which somehow made it harder to breathe. I waited until we were seated before speaking. I said I had reviewed the property records. I said my name had been removed. I said I needed to understand why. My mother responded first. She sighed and said I was being dramatic. She said families did not treat each other like legal disputes. She reminded me of all the times she had supported me when I was younger and asked why I was suddenly being so cold and calculating. Daniel leaned back in his chair and started talking in technical language. He explained asset restructuring, liability exposure, and tax positioning. He said these were standard practices in business and that I did not need to worry about the details. He said I was focusing on the wrong part of the process. Megan waited, then spoke gently. She said she had noticed I seemed stressed lately. She mentioned how demanding my job must be and suggested that maybe I was projecting that pressure onto the family. She said she had already talked to some relatives who were concerned about me. It took me a moment to understand what was happening. Each of them was responding differently, but the message was the same. I was the problem. I said I was not questioning their intentions. I said I was asking for clarity. My mother shook her head and said clarity was not always helpful. She said sometimes love meant trusting each other instead of insisting on control. After dinner, I tried again. I asked directly why my name had been removed without my knowledge. Daniel said it was necessary for the business. Megan said it was probably discussed and I had just forgotten. My mother said she did not remember the details and suggested we let it go. Over the following weeks, the shift became visible outside that house. Family group chats went quiet when I joined. Invitations stopped coming. A cousin I used to speak with regularly stopped returning my calls. When I asked Megan about it, she said people were worried about my mental state and wanted to give me space. I recognized the pattern immediately. No one accused me outright. They simply adjusted the narrative until my concerns sounded like symptoms instead of signals. I decided to contact the attorney who had helped my father years earlier. He had been present during my father's illness and knew our family well. I called his office and explained who I was. There was a pause on the line. Then his assistant said he could not meet with me. When I asked why, she said there was a conflict of interest. She said he was representing another party connected to the property. She would not say who. I hung up and sat there for a long time. That was the moment everything fell into place. The conversations, the silence, the careful way facts were blurred just enough to make me doubt myself. A few days later, I drove to my mother's house without announcing it. She answered the door and looked surprised but not alarmed. I told her I knew about the attorney. I told her my name had been removed intentionally. She did not deny it. She said she was trying to protect the family. I asked her who she was protecting it from. She did not answer. Daniel stayed in the other room. Megan avoided my eyes. No one raised their voice. No one apologized. I stood there and understood something that had taken me years to learn. Being reliable made me expendable. Being calm made me easy to overwrite. I told my mother that I understood. I did not explain what I meant. I did not ask for anything. I simply left. In the car, I felt strangely clear. The confusion was gone. In its place was something quieter and stronger. I stopped trying to convince anyone of my reality that day. I stopped explaining. I stopped asking for permission to be taken seriously. What I felt was not rage. It was recognition. Chapter 3. The system they never expected me to use. What came next did not happen all at once. It happened quietly, the way real shifts usually do. I did not wake up one morning feeling powerful or decisive. I woke up feeling finished with conversations that led nowhere. I stopped calling. I stopped replying. I stopped trying to be understood. Instead, I opened my calendar and booked appointments. The first was with a real estate attorney named Michael Grant, whose office sat above a hardware store in downtown Madison. I chose him because he had no connection to my family and no interest in preserving anyone's feelings. When I sat across from him, I told him only what mattered: where the house was, whose name was on the loan, whose name had been removed from ownership. I told him what I did for a living and said I needed the truth, not reassurance. He listened without interrupting, then leaned back in his chair. "This is not a misunderstanding," he said. "This is a risk transfer." That sentence stayed with me. Michael referred me to a forensic accountant named Laura Chen. She worked out of a small office near the university, the kind of place that looked unremarkable until you realized that nothing important there was accidental. I met her on a Tuesday afternoon and handed over everything I had: loan notices, old emails, copies of documents I barely remembered signing. She did not ask many questions. She skimmed, sorted, and marked pages with small colored tabs. After a while, she looked up. "Do you remember signing anything in 2012 related to shared liability?" she asked. I did. My father had just come home from surgery. The house had needed repairs. Everyone was tired and scared. I had signed because it was easier than asking questions in that moment. Laura nodded. "That signature was reused," she said. I felt something settle in my chest, not shock, recognition. Over the next few weeks, I did not ask how Laura did her work. I did not need to. What mattered were the conclusions. The house had been leveraged in late 2021 as collateral for Riverbend Property Solutions, which was already carrying more debt than Daniel admitted. The loan had been structured so that if the company failed, the financial responsibility would fall to me. Shortly after, my name had been removed from ownership records, limiting my legal control while preserving my exposure. Michael explained it simply. "They isolated the risk," he said, "and assigned it to the person least likely to fight." There was one email that changed the way I saw everything. It was sent from Daniel to Megan in early 2022. I recognized the tone immediately: careful, measured, framed as practicality. "We need to clean this up before the next review," Daniel had written. "She cannot be tied to the asset if the numbers turn." Megan replied later that afternoon, "Agreed. Less emotion, more efficiency." I read those lines over and over, not because they were cruel, but because they were precise. This was not something that happened to me by accident. This was something decided about me. The final confirmation came on a Thursday evening. Laura called and asked if I was somewhere private. "There is one more thing you need to know," she said. I waited. "Your mother was aware," she said. "She attended meetings. She signed off on the removal of your name. She believed this was the only way to protect your brother." I did not speak. Laura did not rush to fill the silence. After we hung up, I sat alone in my apartment with the lights off. I thought about every time my mother had told me to be patient, every time she had said I was strong enough to handle things. I understood then that strength in that family had always meant availability. From that moment on, I stopped framing what I was doing as defense. It was protection. I was not trying to punish anyone. I was making sure I could never be positioned as expendable again. Michael asked me how far I wanted to take it. I said, "As far as the law allows." He nodded once. Then we moved carefully. I did not confront my family with what I knew. I did not give them the chance to reshape the story again. I watched quietly as Daniel continued posting optimistic updates about business growth, as Megan played concerned sister-in-law at gatherings I no longer attended, as my mother left voicemails reminding me that silence was hurtful. I understood now that silence was the only language they could not twist. There was no satisfaction in uncovering the truth. There was only focus. I stopped seeing my family as a source of identity and started seeing them as parties in a transaction that had gone wrong. One afternoon, Michael asked if I wanted to reclaim the house. I thought about it longer than I expected. "No," I said. "I want my name clear." That was the moment I stopped being a daughter in this story. I became something else, a witness, a participant, someone who understood that systems do not care about intention, they care about documentation. When I left Michael's office that day, the air felt sharper. I knew what came next would not be loud or dramatic. It would be procedural. It would be undeniable. And for the first time since this began, I felt ready. Chapter 4. The day they expected me to stay quiet. Enough did not mean finished. It meant I was ready for what came next. The notice arrived by certified mail in early November. Thick paper, formal language, my full legal name typed cleanly at the top. I recognized the law firm immediately. It was the same firm my father had trusted years earlier, the same office that had suddenly developed a conflict of interest when I tried to ask questions. My family had filed a civil complaint against me. They were accusing me of financial interference, emotional distress, and damage to the family's reputation. Not fraud, not theft, just disruption. The kind of accusation designed to make someone look unstable rather than wronged. Michael read the filing slowly, his expression neutral. When he finished, he looked up at me. "They are not trying to win," he said. "They are trying to pressure you." I nodded. The language was familiar. Vague claims, heavy emphasis on intent and tone, very little substance. It was meant to make me uncomfortable enough to retreat, to agree to silence in exchange for peace. They had miscalculated. We responded without emotion. No counter-accusations, no personal commentary, just documentation. Dates, records, emails, financial structures laid out plainly, stripped of narrative. The mediation was scheduled for January in a conference center outside Eau Claire. The building was forgettable. Beige walls, fluorescent lighting, long tables arranged to feel neutral but somehow always favoring the louder voice. I arrived early with Michael and Laura. We reviewed the files quietly. No one tried to reassure me. We did not need to rehearse anything. My family arrived together. My brother Daniel walked in first, relaxed, talking to his attorney as if this were a minor inconvenience. His confidence was intact, polished by years of being protected from consequences. Megan followed him, clutching a folder to her chest, her expression carefully concerned. My mother, Ruth, came last. She avoided looking at me, her eyes fixed on the far wall. When we sat down, Daniel spoke immediately. He described my actions as disruptive and emotionally driven. He said I had misunderstood my role and overreacted in ways that created unnecessary instability. He talked about trust, about betrayal, and about how families should handle conflict privately. Megan added that the stress had taken a toll on everyone. She said she had tried to reach out to me repeatedly. She said she was worried about my mental health, about how hard I was pushing myself. My mother spoke briefly. She said she hoped we could move forward as a family. She did not deny any specific action. She did not explain anything either. When it was our turn, Michael stood. He did not raise his voice. He did not challenge anyone emotionally. He walked the mediator through the timeline, the loan origination, the collateral, the removal of my name from ownership records, the reuse of my signature from earlier documents. Laura explained the financial mechanics in plain language, showing exactly how risk had been shifted onto me without my consent. Then the bank representative spoke. She confirmed that the loan had been issued using my name without proper authorization. She confirmed that the structure violated internal compliance standards. She confirmed that the account had been flagged months earlier and was now under formal review for potential fraud. Daniel interrupted her. "This is being taken out of context," he said. "It was a temporary arrangement." The representative looked directly at him. "It was not compliant," she said. The room went quiet. The mediator called for a break. As people stood, I noticed Daniel checking his phone repeatedly, his earlier confidence slipping. Megan whispered urgently to their attorney, her face pale. My mother remained seated, hands folded tightly in her lap. During the break, Michael received a call. When he returned, he leaned toward me.
"The bank is freezing accounts tied to the business," he said. "They are escalating." When we reconvened, the tone had shifted. Daniel spoke less. Megan did not speak at all. The mediator asked direct questions about disclosure and intent. There were no clean answers. By the end of the session, the complaint against me had lost its momentum. The mediator recommended further legal review and suspended any resolution pending the outcome of the bank's investigation. Outside the conference room, the hallway felt colder. Voices carried more sharply. I heard Daniel arguing with his attorney. "You said this would pressure her," he said. "You said she would back down." Megan stood apart, staring at the floor. My mother lingered near the exit, her shoulders slumped. She did not try to stop me when I walked past. In the weeks that followed, consequences spread quietly. Daniel's credit line was revoked. A development partner withdrew from a pending deal. Emails that had once been brushed aside began to look different when reviewed by people who cared about liability. I did not comment on any of it. I did not explain myself to relatives who suddenly wanted clarity. When the judge formally ordered the case to move into deeper legal review, the ruling was procedural, not dramatic, the kind of decision that changes everything without raising its voice. I attended the hearing alone. As I left the courthouse, snow was falling lightly, softening the edges of the street. I sat in my car for a moment before starting the engine. I did not feel victorious. I felt finished with a version of myself that had believed loyalty would be reciprocated. I drove away without looking back. Not because I was angry, but because I stopped holding it together.
Chapter 5. What I took back was never the house. The collapse did not arrive with sirens or headlines. It came in envelopes, calendar invites, and phone calls that no longer asked for favors. By early spring, the bank's internal review had turned into a federal inquiry. Michael called me one afternoon while I was leaving my office, my bag heavy on my shoulder, my mind already shifting toward dinner and the quiet routine I had rebuilt for myself. He did not soften his voice. "They've referred the case forward," he said. "Daniel has been given an opportunity to cooperate." I sat in my car with the engine off, watching people cross the parking lot, laughing, talking about things that felt impossibly distant. I did not feel satisfaction. I felt a strange grief, not for my brother, but for the inevitability of it all, like the ending had been written years ago and we were only now reading it aloud. A week later, Daniel called me directly, not through our mother, not through Megan, not through a lawyer. His voice sounded unfamiliar, thinner, stripped of the confidence that used to fill every room. He asked if we could meet somewhere neutral. We met at a diner off the highway outside Eau Claire, the kind with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tasted burnt no matter how much cream you added. Daniel was already there when I arrived. Megan sat beside him, hands folded tightly, eyes fixed on the table. Daniel stood when he saw me. He looked exhausted, the kind of tired that does not come from long days, but from running out of ways to explain yourself. He said he never meant for me to get hurt. I did not respond right away. Silence has a way of making people keep talking. He said the company was bleeding money. He said he was under pressure from lenders. He said he thought he could fix everything if he just bought time. I asked him one question. "Did you know my name would be stuck on that loan if everything collapsed?" He swallowed and said yes. Megan spoke then, her voice careful. "We thought you'd understand," she said. "You always do. You're practical." That was the moment something sharp moved through me. Not rage, not shouting, just the clear understanding of how they had built their plan around my character. They had not hoped I would forgive them. They had depended on it. Daniel asked what I wanted. I told him exactly what I wanted. I wanted my name cleared. I wanted every document corrected. I wanted no financial ties between us, and I wanted it done properly, through legal channels, not promises over coffee. He nodded too quickly, like agreement might reverse time. He asked if I would talk to my mother. I stood up. I left cash on the table for my coffee. I walked out without answering. Not because I was cold, but because I understood something important. My presence had become leverage. Emotion had become their last strategy. 2 months later, Riverbend Property Solutions filed for bankruptcy. It was not dramatic. It was a notice buried in public records and a quiet ripple through local business circles. Partners withdrew, accounts froze, phone calls stopped being returned. The civil complaint against me was dismissed shortly after, not because anyone apologized, but because there was nothing left to push with. The attempt to silence me had only created a trail that made the truth easier to follow. The house was the final loose end. Michael and Laura worked through the legal cleanup patiently. Ownership records were corrected, my financial exposure was removed, my name was restored where it belonged and erased where it never should have been. It did not undo the stress or the betrayal, but it aligned reality with the truth. When everything was stable enough for me to choose, I chose not to return. People expect that moment to be emotional. They imagine me standing in the doorway, reclaiming something I lost. But I could not live inside a symbol that had been used against me, not anymore. I sold the house through a clean, documented process. No drama, no speeches. I set up a personal trust with boundaries that could not be rewritten by guilt or urgency. For the first time since my father got sick, my resources belonged to my future, not someone else's crisis. My mother Ruth called me after the sale finalized. She asked if we could meet. We met in a small park near the lake in early fall. The air was cool, the trees just beginning to turn. She walked slowly, shoulders rounded, hands tucked into her coat pockets. She looked older than I remembered, or maybe I was seeing her without hope clouding my vision. She said she only wanted to keep the family together. I told her keeping something together should not require one person to disappear under it. She said Daniel was her son. She said she did what she thought a mother had to do. I said I was her daughter. That silence was the most honest conversation we had ever had. She asked if I hated her. I told her no. Hate would have kept her close. I told her I was done being volunteered as the solution. I told her I wished her well, but I would not return to a role built on sacrifice. When I stood to leave, she reached for my hand, then stopped. Some distances cannot be closed by touch. I walked back to my car and felt something loosen inside me. Not triumph, not revenge, just release. I did not take back a house. I took back my name. I took back my boundaries. I took back the right to be treated like a person, not a resource. If you've ever been the reliable one in a family that quietly depends on your sacrifice, remember this: silence is not weakness when it is chosen. Understanding the system is not cold when it is used to protect your life, and truth has a way of collapsing anything built on denial. If this story resonated with you, share the part that felt familiar. Stories like this remind people they are not alone, and if you want to hear more stories where strength looks like restraint and justice looks like proof, stay here.